Hello, wonderful soul. We live in a time where truly massive ascension energies are permanently active, where the question is not whether someone is in an ascension process, but rather when and in which phase they are. And the individual phases of the ascension process can also last for years and do not follow a linear path. This is what I am explaining here today, which phase you are in and how they are structured linearly. But that means that we often find ourselves in different phases at the same time or move back and forth in the respective processes, which is indeed completely normal. I will explain the signs you need to pay attention to and how you can deal with your ascension processes. It's a very exciting topic. Stay tuned. My name is Riedel, following the shamanic path for 20 years, initiated in the traditions of the Incas and Blackfoot. And the ascension process in general can be initiated quite suddenly. I have also observed this in myself. Just like that, you read a book, attend a seminar, or even a friend casually and nonchalantly mentions a sentence. For example, in my specific case, it was, "What are you waiting for?" Or what is holding you back in any way? These are also things that can occupy you for days and then create an impact, where this awakening process, this ascension process, can be activated, even in the slightest. In addition to these external impulses, internal growth processes can also take place. Many people do not know that our consciousness changes significantly at regular intervals, leading to a developmental boost that typically occurs once between the ages of 28 and 35, and once between 49 and 56. These are the major shifts. If you find yourself among them, then it can be quite normal for you to say, for example, okay, I want to reorient my life. I want to realign my life here now because of my changed values, because of my new worldview and perspectives that I have gained from it. And that is a completely normal inner growth process of our consciousness. This means that if you find yourself in a crisis somewhere here, between 28 and 35 or 49 and 56, it is completely normal for you to experience various effects, which you might hear about again here. First of all, I would like to delve deeper into the term ascension. Ascension means that we have a heightened consciousness and understanding or immerse ourselves in it, thereby gaining new abilities and new possibilities to co-create and co-manifest the material world, in essence. In recent years, we have been increasingly exposed to these more intense and ascension energies. Therefore, the question is no longer whether someone is exposed to these energies in any way once again, but rather how significantly it manifests in you and how well you can handle these processes in your life. And whether we want it or not, we are all affected by it in any way. That's why, in my humble opinion, it is essentially and fundamentally important to learn as quickly as possible to deal with it, more consciously, so that we no longer resist it but can use these benevolent energies for ourselves, in order to create something magnificent for our own benefit afterward. This video should rather be titled, "In which ascension phase you are currently in, currently." And very often, severe ascension symptoms frequently occur, such as headaches, concentration problems, fatigue, intense dreams, and possibly sudden insights, sometimes even disorientation up to the point of feeling meaningless, helpless, or sad. So these kinds of things can indeed also happen. And that's because our physical body constantly has to adapt, and also because we are becoming more sensitive, which allows us to perceive everything that happens around us more intensely. And we often struggle with that. In order to fully and comprehensively understand this intricate ascension process, I would like to start with Plato's allegory of the cave. Imagine there are people who permanently live in a dark and isolated cave, and for whom only life in the cave exists. And these people are trapped or imprisoned in the dark, cold cave and are shown a shadow play by other people whom they cannot see and who remain hidden from their view. And imagine that there is essentially a wall, and over this wall figures can appear and project their shadows onto the opposite wall. The other people who see these shadows, this shadow play, cannot identify and recognize or see the people who are essentially controlling the figures during this shadow play, basically. And during these years, as they repeatedly observed this shadow play, people truly believe that these are apparitions from other dimensions, perhaps even gods, who are now proclaiming the truth to them, speaking to them. And then they start to analyze and interpret this shadow play further and align their beliefs in their minds and thoughts accordingly. It took years over time for the worldview of the cavemen to become increasingly complex. And there is indeed one of the cave dwellers who is not satisfied with this superficial truth deeply in his heart and soul. And then he slowly and carefully discovers an exit from the cave and gradually goes out of the cave. Yes, and he sees sunlight for the first time. Yes, and it takes him several days at first for his eyes to get used to this sunlight, because he has never really seen the sun before. And then gradually he begins to recognize the meadows, the trees, the water, the clouds as they pass by. And overall he is absolutely completely overwhelmed by what he sees, which he cannot categorize because there are no terms for it in the cave language, as he is not familiar with this perception. And at some point in time he also sees his own reflection on the surface of the water, and he understands how the intricate play of light and shadow works, and consequently he realizes that what he had learned in the cave before does not correspond to the truth. Yes, then he goes back into the cave with the other cave dwellers to report on his experiences, for which he hardly has any words, because in the cave language there are no words for it. That's why the inhabitants of the cave can't understand him and look at him with incomprehension, sometimes even with aggression, and even call him a heretic because he questions what they truly believe in. Indeed, they wonder why he can't accept their views actually. For him, his worldview has changed so drastically that he can no longer believe in what the cave dwellers believe. And finally, he departs the cave to spend his life outside in freedom, spends it in complete freedom. This parable describes very well what can happen to you in your ascension process, and also in which phase you might find yourself as you go through this ascension. And the first sign is that you start to question the truth and, along with it, your worldview, feeling inside that there must be more than what you can touch, and your perception of reality, and the way you see the world, and the things you believe in, a so-called deeper truth that lies beneath the surface. And exactly this feeling that you experience can really drive you to want to thoroughly dive deeper. And in this phase, if you find yourself there, you might read more books, participate in various seminars to gain even more knowledge in order to essentially develop a more comprehensive worldview for yourself, essentially. Specifically, this means, if you apply it to the allegory of the cave, that you are now about to detach yourself from the truth that has been taught to you. And now you start researching, essentially speaking, exploring in detail the way out of this cave, whether there is a way out, and if so, how that might happen. And that essentially brings us to the second phase. You have essentially started on the path to leaving the cave, and then your worldview changes dramatically and significantly. That means the world, as it used to work for you, exists less and less, increasingly more and more. And then you are also definitely able to recognize the higher or larger connections that were not related to you at all before. Absolutely. Then you may indeed discover that you are, in truth, truly a multi-dimensional being that is actually at home on various levels simultaneously. So you have a consciousness that is an awareness of your own existence, an ego, a subconscious mind, and a higher self, or also known as a superconscious. And it is precisely these different parts or levels that we carry within us that we now need to unite, so to speak, and live piece by piece what you carry in your core essence, which is closely connected to your higher self. This way, you can continue to discover that you have an ego and can refine it further, so to speak, so that you can live your true self without any breaks. So live more and more from what is anchored in your heart, in your core essence. And you can also engage your subconscious in this process. So here you first learn step by step to consciously and mindfully create, consciously manifest, and consciously change your resonance. And this automatically leads naturally into the third stage or third phase. Because during this ascension process, you will indeed be massively confronted with your old worldview and, connected to it, with your anxieties and fears, your emotions, and also your limiting beliefs that stand in your way. And these can be very intense and incredibly demanding processes that can be physically exhausting, emotionally draining, and mentally taxing, making you feel like you're not normal. And that's exactly where many people find themselves, having problems with it. On one hand, they feel like they are standing alone, that they are not quite normal when these resistances come, when the confrontation with their own shadow issues arises. It initially creates a feeling of being lost, a feeling of not being on the right path, thinking it should be easier. And that's why, at this point, indeed, connect with others who are also on their path, as it is completely normal for these resistances to arise. And above all, of course, you will also definitely be confronted with your shadow issues or limiting beliefs that want to keep you small. This is also the inner critic. The second and third phases often happen in parallel. That means you naturally gain insights into higher truths and new realizations, and you also recognize that you have a higher self, your ego consciousness, and your subconscious. But you will also be confronted with what stands in your way. And that is often the ping pong game that can last for years until we can refine ourselves, so to speak, until we free ourselves from what is truly holding us back. For example, that you often don't give yourself permission to lead a life where you can be the center of attention, or that you give yourself permission to be free and live in abundance. That it is indeed your birthright, and anyone who tries to convince you otherwise, you will learn to gradually and carefully remove from your life, so to speak, so that you can let go of this falsehood. You are not obligated to hold on to this truth unless it benefits you and unless you naturally and genuinely want to. It is a completely normal process, so make sure to give yourself absolutely enough time. Just imagine, it took you many years, perhaps even decades, to develop and shape your current worldview. You have believed in this perspective strongly and firmly, just as you do now, with the same conviction and certainty. And that's why you should also give yourself time here to create a new worldview and then believe in this new worldview so that you may eventually realize that everything preventing you from believing it is yourself. You can now simply start giving yourself permission to believe in your new worldview and also give yourself enough time for it. Because then we come to the fourth phase. You return to the cave and try to tell others about your truth or your experiences and describe the associated truth. But you somehow realize that you are somehow more and more increasingly misunderstood. And it can indeed happen that you truly fall into a crisis because there is hardly anyone or no one left from your old environment who understands exactly that. And then it can happen that you might indeed try to convert other people who are not yet ready for it, sometimes. This can then create a feeling of loneliness, of emptiness, making you feel like you are somewhat lost. No one understands you in the process you are in. That's why I want to share an image with you here, because I can really understand it very well. I have experienced it myself, and I felt as if I had left my old shore. So I left my old life and was on a suspension bridge, and the other shore was not in sight, and everything around me was just foggy and unclear and indistinct and unclear. But I knew I definitely couldn't ever go back to the old shore, back to my old life again. But the new life has not yet unfolded, and that's why I felt a sense of emptiness, of helplessness, a feeling that maybe I was doing the wrong thing, not being normal, wishing that I could just live a normal life, which was no longer possible. And if you find yourself at this point, know that it is completely normal. Give yourself time and focus on taking step by step on this suspension bridge, moving more and more in the new direction of your life. Then your new life will gradually take shape more and more. Again, this is a completely normal process. And that's why I want to emphasize once more that as you progress in your development, your channels will continue to open up. That means you are becoming more sensitive, you perceive more, and you might also have a connection to a kind of higher wisdom, higher truth, which you can hardly share with anyone. Then it is important to connect with people, with like-minded individuals who are also on their path. Then we come to the fifth and final phase. You have arrived within yourself, resting in your core essence. And bit by bit, you are now beginning to live your core essence more and more outwardly. And depending on the vision you carry in your heart, mind, and soul, you now begin to implement it step by step, gradually. So if there are bigger visions, then of course it takes longer. If they are smaller visions, or maybe you have already accomplished a lot in your life, then you might not need to implement as much. This path is also the path of one's own destiny. That means living out what you carry in your heart, your soul core, externally. This is essentially what I always say, to follow your soul's calling. That is the reason why we are incarnated here. Then you are indeed connected with your higher self, and are also able to meticulously reshape your ego piece by piece, allowing you to live and truly realize yourself without any limitations. Absolutely. Then you consciously and in a deliberate manner manifest your reality, and along with it the new world. And thus, you have indeed clearly understood that everything originates from within, and you have also truly learned to change your own resonance so that you can actively manifest externally exactly what you carry within you. You have essentially harmonized your outer world with your inner self, basically. And that is self-actualization. When one has reached this fifth and final phase, one might think that there is nothing else beyond it. But I claim that the further you develop, meaning your vibrational frequency, the higher you develop in your journey and growth, the more it continues to open up for you, I believe. I compare it to a ladder. When you look up at the ladder from the bottom and you only see 10 rungs, you climb up step by step, and then when you reach the 10th rung, you look up again and then come to fully realize that there might be 20 more rungs to go. And that's exactly what undoubtedly results from it. The further we develop, the more opportunities arise, and the more abilities we also develop. It's a process that never ends. I find this path exciting, because at the beginning you never know where your path will lead you. You only know the path and direction from your heart, and may already feel at the very beginning that you are truly, deeply, and undoubtedly destined for something greater than the life you have lived so far. And if you indeed follow this call, you will be truly rewarded with an absolutely remarkable life you could not have imagined before. Similar to the steps on this ladder, step by step, completely brand new possibilities arise, and you literally and figuratively grow beyond yourself. All you need is the bravery and determination to step out of your old comfort zone and embrace new opportunities and do things completely differently than you have ever done in your life before. Maybe you also do new things that you have never done before in order to be, in a way, the person you truly are. Completely let the light you carry within you shine outward. Yes, and by doing so, we also give others permission to let their light shine as well. Then we are now indeed the pioneers of the new era, truly demonstrating to others what is indeed possible and serving as beacons to help them shine their own light. In fact, indeed. In conclusion, I would like to say that all these stages I just explained do not happen linearly. Rather, many things often happen simultaneously. Or sometimes we catapult ourselves back, sometimes forward again, depending on the situation. But here is an overview so you can better understand it for your own development. And maybe you recognize one or the other in yourself. Feel free to leave a comment below the video so that others can see that they are not alone in their processes. Yes, those were my thoughts on this topic. And if you definitely really enjoyed this video, feel free to pass it on to others or share it. And if you want more insights or a glimpse into my daily routines, just follow me on Instagram. The link is in the description below. See you next time. Bye. Ciao. Goodbye.